And today's webinar topic is running a startup, perspective of two women founders and CEOs from Cornell. And this event is organized by CTL, Center for Technology Licensing, where Cornell's tech transfer office managing its intellectual property, catalyzing the commercialization of Cornell technologies and supporting technology ventures. And this is one of our WI2 series. It stands for Women Innovators Initiatives. So early on, we have events for the first one for women inventors at Cornell. The second one, investing in women entrepreneurs. And today is the third one in this event series. And I'm Alice Lee. I'm the executive director of CTL, and I will be moderating today's panel discussion. Before I introduce our panel speakers and start the conversation, we will do a quick poll of today's audience so we can have a better understanding about your background. Linda, can you do the poll? Please click who you are. Okay. Do you have all the answers now, Linda? Okay, we'll close this. Yep. And we'll see the poll. Okay, so we have the most category is the Cornell alum, and there are some faculty member, and the second category, most of the students, there are also staff and also other people in the Cornell community. Wonderful. All right, so today we're very fortunate and also very proud to have our recent graduate who have started a very successful entrepreneurial career. And first I want to introduce Dr. Rachel Dorin, and she is the CEO at Terapore Technologies. She got her Ph.D. from Cornell in 2013 in the Department of Material Science and Engineering. And also I'd love to introduce Dr. Siyu Huang, and she is also the CEO of Lionano. And she got her PhD in chemistry in 2012 and her MBA in 2014. Both of them are also founders of their company. All right, first I want to maybe Dr. Dorin to talk a little bit about herself and also about her company. Rachel?
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to. Good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here. And Alice asked us to just start by giving an introduction to ourselves and to our companies. So I will share a couple slides really quickly to help a little bit with this, give you a sense of my background and what I'm doing today with Terapore. So I was born in the Bay Area. That's where I am now. Really, Silicon Valley, a very entrepreneurial hub, I would say, globally. And then I got really interested in science once I started my educational career. And I went to the University of New Mexico, where I studied biology and chemistry. And at that time, I started working in a lab, Sandia National Labs, working on nanostructured platinum for fuel cell catalysis. So very technical, very hands-on in the lab. I got to do, wet chemistry. I got to work with various electron microscopes, and I just really, really enjoyed it. I had a ton of fun there, and being in that lab after a couple of years made me realize I wanted to pursue my education in materials, and that's when I went to Cornell, and I was in the material science department. And I show a picture here. This is from a Christmas party one year at Uli's house, my thesis advisor. And my experience at Cornell was just very positive, very, very fun, very educational. And Cornell has a really unique culture, I believe, because you're a bit isolated, but there's so much excellent work and so many, bright, creative people that it really felt like a family where you can do innovative things in that type of environment. So I wanted to show a picture of the research group here, and also my advisor, Uli Wiesner, who really allowed me to explore anything that I was interested in. So I got my main degree, my Ph.D. in material science. I studied what we call non-equilibrium tri-block polymer structures as ultrafiltration membranes. So I took a special type of polymer and turned them into a special type of membrane or filter. But during my time at Cornell, I was also able to get a minor in business, and that is a little bit unusual, but I had seen somebody that I was dating at the time. He was a PhD in physics. He's now my husband. He studied some entrepreneurship at Cornell. And I was like, oh, you can do that. You can do that. You can take classes in the MBA school. And so it was a really nice, almost juxtaposition of different fields, very different fields, but bringing them together into kind of innovation and commercialization of technology. So that was very formative for me, taking classes at the business school, as was Professor Ben Daniel. And I know the David Ben Daniel Venture Challenge is coming up, so I wanted to put a little plug out there for that. So I had a lot of really great mentors, and I think really excellent and fun technical training. And now I took this PhD thesis work and turned it into a company called Terapore Technologies. And what we do is we create filters that have very uniform pore sizes on the nanometer length scale. And on this slide, I like to show some SEM images. So if you look at the scale bars, we're looking at the tens, hundreds of nanometer length scale. So we're working at the nanoscale. And conventional filters on the left have this, for the non-technical on the call, I call them a bowl of spaghetti, or they look like pickup sticks under the microscope. They are not very ordered, very broad pore size distributions. And that really limits their ability to do really precise separations. And what we do at Terapore is we make filters that are very, very precise and uniform at the nanoscale, as you can see in this SEM image on the right. And we really harness the power of block copolymers. This technology came from a polymer materials group to create these very uniform structures. So at school, I was doing this, on glass slides in the basement of Kimball and Thurston. And then, my goal at Terapore has been to bring this technology to the market. And I really saw that this was a breakthrough in the field of membranes. And I wanted to figure out how I can offer this to the world and make separations in the world better, because I know that there's a need for it. And so first we make the material, but then to productize it, you really have to turn it into something tangible, something that you can sell. These are our widgets here on the right. Basically, we make the filter, that's the core technology, but then it has to be packaged in a way that a customer can really utilize it for value. And one of the greatest pleasures for me of running this company and starting this company has been really seeing that process of creating a product. And we are a very small company here at Terapore. We're about a 20-person company. We're venture backed, but we're very vertically integrated as a small organization. And that's a bit of a strategy for a startup in terms of, maximizing value that you can create. But we go all the way from designing our membrane properties that we want for a particular separation application to, custom polymer synthesis, to roll-to-roll membrane manufacturing. We now have 2 very large machines that we make rolls of material on. To device assembly now, we have multiple clean rooms where we make these membranes because they're used in the pharmaceutical industry, and where we assemble the devices. And one thing I've learned is you really have to capture more of the supply chain than you kind of think you might. And so we also have very extensive testing labs. In fact, we have a lot of monoclonal antibodies, biology expertise, a virus testing lab, a BSL-2 lab to test different viruses. So in order to really capture the value from this polymer membrane technology, we actually have to get expertise across a larger range of the supply chain. And I think I'll stop my share and just show a little bit of, did I stop my share there? I think so. Yes. Show a little bit of sort of the tangible products we made. And my path, there's so many students on the phone. My path when I was a student was, making very small swatches, like of these membranes on glass slides, in a little room, and I couldn't reproduce them very well. And there were a lot of people who said, like, how are you really going to scale that? Is block copolymer synthesis scalable? Can you actually make that on a roll-to-roll machine? And these are legitimate questions to ask. And in my mind, it was like, yes, this is possible because this is an engineering challenge. This isn't a science challenge. The science challenge, like science can break through this if we have the engineering. And sort of the mentality in a startup is like, if there's a will, there's a way. And so when we used to make it at swatches, now we make our membranes, we make rolls of this membrane. This is just a 4-inch, but we do up to a foot routinely multiple times a day for different partners. And then this packaging piece also became really important. So packaging into these little devices so that customers can use them. I have to be honest when I say, once I got to this stage, oh, I can make this membrane in a roll, I was like, haha, we're done, we did it. But that's not true. I'm a membrane person. My crew were membrane people, so we know how to work with a sheet of membrane, but our customers in the biopharmaceutical industry don't. They need a plug and play thing. So that's how you get to these kind of little devices that are easy for them to use. Well, then it turns out this might work with 0.5 liter volume when they're developing a process to make a new monoclonal antibody drug that treats diseases like cancer and rheumatoid arthritis, really valuable, important drugs that are hard to purify and where our filter can really add value. But then they're going to want to move to the clinical scale and test this in a small human trial. And so we started making cassettes that are about this size, and this will process, maybe 10 liters of fluid, and then ultimately this is going to go in production. And so we now stack these even larger. This is a 20 stack of membrane for large clinical scale processes. And so we went from little swatches to rolls to the devices to this, and then this is our clinical scale. We haven't done this yet, but next on our path will be the process scale, which will look very similar to this stack, but be about the size of a laptop. The footprint will be the size of a laptop. So for me, one of the greatest pleasures has been to really see the technology, how you start with, ordering some chemicals in a bottle in a lab and making small things to really creating a product that can be used in the world. So that's a little bit about my background and what we do at Terapore.
Okay, thank you. It's so exciting to see the products actually you hold in hand these days. And we just started with the research when you were in the lab in Cornell early on. Actually, to prepare for this, and earlier I looked into our database, and I saw this today actually is the 10-year anniversary. Rachel disclosed this invention to our office, and I'm just for fun of it, I'm just reading to the group. And this, our docket number 5452. The title that time Rachel disclosed to our office was Tuning Structure and Property of Braided Tree Block Terpolymer-based mesoporous and hybrid films. And this closing date, listen to this, it's April 1st, 2011. It is almost exactly 10 years anniversary. So it's good to see that inventions happening in the lab, now going into the startup company, now we have products. It's a wonderful, wonderful story. And we will talk more about this. But let's now turning to Dr. Huang. Siyu, maybe you can share with us your story a little bit and your company to start with. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Alice. And I really appreciate Rachel's sharing and about her passion about a product and about a company and the technology. So for my situation, we're actually in the stealth mode right now, and I can't disclose too much. So hopefully in the next meeting, I'll be able to share with you more about the slides and the products right now. A little bit background about myself. I've been very passionate about sustainability when I was little. And I joined, when I was 6 years old, joined the UNESCO program for global environmental. And that started really planting the seed for my passion of sustainability. And in my undergrad, I actually went to Sweden for 2 years of exchange program and finished up my bachelor thesis out there doing biofuel research. And I came over to Cornell afterwards to worked on some chemistry and biochemical part of the research, and where I actually met our co-founder for the first company that we built, Lionano Inc. with Professor Actor Union, and also the co-founder, and also later on become my husband. At that time was my boyfriend, Alex Siyu. We founded the company together through our journey at Cornell. Yeah, actually it took me 3.5 years to finish my PhD. It was a little surprisingly earlier than I expected, and I just was wandering around. I don't know what to do, and I came upon with Alex in a technology transfer center. At that time, it was still called the CTech. And I was asking Alex, hey, is there some work that I can do? And I remembered Alex was very welcoming me. And like, we just sit together and look at some technology in a portfolio of at that time, the CTech. And also when I was like actually looking over my husband's shoulder, my boyfriend's shoulder on his thesis, I realized oh, there is some interesting technology you're working on. Do you want to patent it through CTech? By the way, I'm working on that technology transfer right now with Alice. So it's very interesting that he thought that this is a great opportunity, and we talked to his advisor, and we all jump in for it. So fast forward, I think I started my internship or consulting internship for about 3 months in starting from I would say January to April-ish time. And then we find out that, oh, they're a great technology we should work on. And we filed a patent for Cornell technology throughout the summertime. And I would say by the fall, we started to have this technology that we have in hand that was an initial patent draft. And actually, thanks to the entire team's help, that I was able to draft one of the first initial, I would say it's very rookie type of first draft of disclosure to CTech, and actually that's the first three patents for Lionano, and we ended up licensing one, and I think that was a really great initial story we were telling, and also another important encounter that I had was with the Cornell entrepreneurship program. So I actually started applying for MBA after graduated, because I realized that it's just not very much job to do for a PhD graduate in Ithaca. And so I actually fortunately was able to get into the MBA program and was in part of the entrepreneurship track. And I met with Professor Wesley Tsai, which is a really important mentor for me. And he has been helping me through his entrepreneurship classes. And we end up meeting with investors, meeting with lawyers, meeting with accountants, and all this, I would say the grant writers and various different type of partners throughout his class. So we joined the class in September 2013, and we found the company in October 2013. So that's where the initial point of Lionano started. And we actually started by working on anode technology, and soon we realized that it didn't work. Unfortunately, we went out and we got a small grant from actually a Cornell and Columbia and NYU joint partnership program to go on and search for customers. And we come back with a conclusion that this does not work. And so we come back and I really pivoted technology very quickly. And before we raised the first round of financing. And at the same time, we don't have money. So we're pretty much just bootstrapping the company along the way. And so I find my daytime job in Johnson & Johnson, working on sales and marketing and doing business development for the company about 3 years. And at the same time, carried 2 babies. Olivia was the first one that she was born when I was still an MBA student at Cornell. Actually shortly after graduated from Cornell, and Leo was born right before the Series A close of our company, and right after I quit my job in J&J too. So that's a little history about the company's early stage, and I think Cornell has put in a lot of effort, and we have benefited a lot from Cornell's network in early stage. And fast forward a few years, we built the cathode material business from grams to kilograms, and now we have hundreds, thousands of tons of annual capacity for cathode material manufacturing. So, I don't know how much you know about batteries, but batteries for whether electric vehicles or for computers typically have cathode, which is the plus side of the battery, and anode, which is the minus side of the battery. There's a separator, prevent the shortage between cathode and anode, and electrolyte that conducts ion back and forth. So our first technology was working on the next generation high capacity cathode materials. And that actually brought us to the stage that we realized that is really important technology. But after you successfully grow the technology to the manufacturing scale, you get it all the customer orders booked out for technology, you realize that it's not only play for technology anymore, it's a play about power, about cash, about all the regulatory influence you can put in the market. And then we realized that it's no longer a passion. So we actually hired a general manager to manage that manufacturing business for us. And now our entire funding team and investors are moving to the next venture we're working on, which is still in stealth mode. It's actually working on next generation battery as a full solution to the EV industry. So far, I'll say we have started from a small lab in McGovern Center. I still remember it's in a very beautiful white building for McGovern Center, and all the way to I'll say like 5 people, 10 people lab, and then we have 70 people employees in our manufacturing facility, and now we also have additional 30 employees for the solid state, which is next generation battery we're developing. And the company is going to have a major announcement in about 2 weeks. So feel free to keep an eye on it. And we're really excited about this new opportunity in clean tech. And it is really interesting to see the cyclic circles for clean tech as well. And so far, I would say within the 2 companies, we have raised more than $50 million in the company. And while the other company is on exit mode right now, and our current company, we also just closed a spin-out financing round. And we are also engaged with 5 out of top 10 global OEMs, basically the automotive companies from Germany, from France, and from the US to develop our next generation batteries. Yeah, that's a little background about myself and the company.
Okay, wonderful, Siyu. And I hear growth not only in new companies and new products, but also new family and children. This is a really rich story there. Short, but a very rich story there. And as Siyu mentioned, since they're all, young entrepreneurs, and some of the memory is very fresh. And she mentioned that in 2013, at the time when she was graduating from Ph.D. and also MBA student. And at that time, we have the CTL, the Johnson School, sort of joined consulting sort of arrangement for the MBA student to work in our office. So I'm glad that helps someone with your company growth. Okay, so the next I'm going to start with some questions and to ask both Rachel and Siyu. And for the audience, and we encourage you to post your questions under the Q&A. So if those questions can be integrated with whatever topic we're talking, then we will try to do that and integrate those questions together with our conversation. If it's not, we can answer those questions at the end of the discussion, at the panel discussion. So please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A part. And when you post it, the panelists can see that initially not by the audience, but when we're answering that, we will click in and the audience can see that as well. So please feel free to post your questions to start that. So I have some initial questions to get the conversation going. And you were all PhD students before doing research, and some of today's audience or other alums, young researchers probably have that similar questions. So when you were a graduate student doing research, academic research at the time, and what was your view towards research and innovation and maybe commercialization in the future? Yeah, maybe we'll start, Rachel, with this question.
Sure. Yeah. When I was a student and doing research, there was just a lot of joy in the technology. So it was very, very technically focused, really fun to do things that nobody had ever done before, and exciting. It was fun to be able to really spend all your time thinking about that, and to have access to, like I said before, world-class equipment, world-class thinkers, many different fields. And my perspective on kind of commercialization was that I was pretty intimidated by it. I was like, is this really possible? It became, I think when, a few years before I was a grad student, entrepreneurship, commercialization of technologies kind of started to become more popular, I would say, and entrepreneurship is sort of popular like it is today, so there's more resources for it. But I started to feel like, okay, I think this is possible, but it was also very intimidating. I saw resources like CTL is a great resource, the business school, mentors that you find around campus, entrepreneurs from Cornell, like Siyu and myself. Like there was another group of entrepreneurs right before us that I'm sure we both talked to. So I honestly, I felt intimidated by it, but also thought that it was possible. The other resource I would mention is federal grants. And Siyu mentioned this, but Terapore really started with like NSF, NIH, DITRA, DOE grants. And that's a very comfortable and common bridge between, technology at university and a startup company, because writing a proposal, being very technical, kind of being forced to think a little bit about the business case, but being able to rely on your technical skills and your proposal writing skills, that's a great way to bridge yourself into kind of the commercial and the startup world. And so, yeah, that was how I saw it when I was a student.
See?
Yeah, so when I was at Cornell, I always know that I wanted to do something related to startup in the future, because my family is really an entrepreneur family, and my dad is one of the first generation biotech entrepreneurs, and he was actually a polymer scientist to begin with. And I grown up like witnessing where I was basically putting labels when I was like 6 years old in the kitchen for him, and then he was putting a whole bunch of soaps, which I don't know. I have no idea what they are at that time, and then it really come down to my passion in sustainability. I think I just keep searching for something that could make it happen in the future for commercialization, and I think I always feel extremely lucky that I met with Alice and met with Professor Tsang, and we have a really great mentor from the research side, Professor Actor Bunya, to help us hold our hands and take us through the entire journey from research innovation to commercialization. And I think from the research side, Professor Bunya was extremely supportive in developing the technology and giving us constant advice and bringing even customers and investors to us. And when it comes to CTech, I think we had a really exciting discussions about licensing and innovations. And also CTech brought us this initial grant opportunities with PowerBridge, and which is the tri-party funding between New York State and also Columbia, Cornell, and NYU. And that was extremely helpful to help us establish what we want and what is our path for commercialization. Because before that, I was basically a PhD student. I know I wanted to do something, but I have no clue about how to do it. And I still remember in the summer, CTech had a boot camp about startups. And I think that's the first one I have this idea about, hey, the business model, what are the different steps about value chain, supply chain, and all this different ideas before I got into business school. So that really accelerated our speed to execution in founding the company together. Yeah, and also from that grant, that grant is very interesting. It's different from the typical DOE or DOD grant that we're seeking for, but it's dedicated for customer discovery. So I think that learning is really helpful initially, because for the battery industry, it's not like, hey, you can go to the Penn Station and interview 100 customers, you will be able to learn anything. You have to go with big customers overseas or like somewhere out of like the Michigan area, and you have to interview all this customer before you're able to grasp the market and understand the challenges in the technology. Yeah, so that's a little answer from myself.
Right. So, and also I want to comment on in the resource available in the community. You mentioned a few things that boot camps and also some joint program with the state. I also want to use the opportunity to mention that there's these resources that have been evolving. For example, we have the iCorp node program, then offering this NSF iCorp mechanism to help people to do customer discovery. They also, we have these incubators and many programs there. So I just want to mention that, what's available these days. Okay, so with that, and that's you graduated from your PhD study, and maybe describing the early days founding a company, and when you look back, what's the most important steps when you look back, describing those days. And also in related to that, in the audience, there is this question: what are the pros and cons to have a startup in the Bay Area versus Ithaca, right? So yeah, maybe have Siyu start answer for, some of the question at least. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, so I think the key turning point for us, I would say starting from CTech, when we were able to file our first 3 patents, or Alex was able to disclose his first patents. And then it comes to the class that we were working with Professor Wesley Tsai on a commercialization technology to found a company. And then I think it's a really important journey for us to move our headquarters to Boston. And I was fortunate to be able to find a job here in Boston too. But I think that move was really important. And also because we had a lab in Ithaca at that time, we would have moved to Bay Area if we had the luxury, but we wanted to retain our lab with a very minimal cost from the company side in McGovern Center. I think McGovern Center has been extremely helpful to incubate early stage technologies from the company. And I think coming to Boston definitely broadened our horizon significantly. And I think for that year, we raised more funding than the entire upstate New York after we come to Boston. So it's really a important step for the company. And I think, yeah, I really hope that like Ithaca will have a better fundraising community there, but I think it's really important move if you want to raise funding for startups. And yeah, the Bay Area and Boston is definitely a really important destination.
Okay. Rachel?
Yeah, so starting with the first question, what were the most important things when I look back? There were 3 things that came to my mind, and it's appropriate that this call is organized by CTL because IP is really critical for a technology-driven company. And so in the beginning, all you have is your IP. You don't have a product to sell, you don't have a team, you don't have money, you've got IP. And so IP is the first thing. The second thing that's really critical is communication skills. And it surprised me how frequently my ability to communicate matters in successfully running a business, from writing emails to investors to recruiting talent for the team. And there was something that Uli, my thesis advisor, told me. I remember standing in the stairwell between Kimball and Thurston, and we were talking about a presentation. He said, Rachel, the audience matters. Like, you can't use the same deck you just used to present to those professors for this other audience. Maybe it's a little easier, but your audience matters. And start every communication that you're doing. I'm sure a lot of folks on this call do PowerPoint presentations, but an email communication, a conversation. Start every interaction, every communication with who is my audience. And I really just remembered that. So that was the second key thing that I didn't realize was going to be so important. And then the third one is really, build a network. And like, what does that mean? It means talking to people. It means people. It means, coming to events like this and following up and, sending emails to people, trying to schedule calls. So I think building the people part, the network, is kind of the third thing that's really important. And then to answer, so IP was the first one, communication skills, always remember your audience, and then build your network. You can't be shy. You have to get out of like your desk or your lab space. And then the second question about, starting a company in the Bay Area versus Ithaca. So Terapore was actually, we started in upstate New York in Rochester because my husband had his company in Rochester, and it wasn't far from Ithaca. It was comfortable. We could use the university. There was some lab spaces there. I was like, well, they have this kind of like Kodak culture. And I tried my darndest. I put my all into trying to raise capital in upstate New York and tell my story and share the passion that we have for what our technology can really do in the world and in the market from a business standpoint. And I wasn't able to really successfully raise. It was, Cornell, we got some funding through Cornell, through, friends and family, but it was very, very difficult in upstate New York. And we made a decision, and it was really like, should we go to Boston or should we go to the Bay Area? And Boston would have made a lot of sense. It's pretty close. There's a big membrane community there. Our target market, the biopharma industry, is like, really hot there also. And we decided to come to the Bay Area for a couple reasons. I already had a network here. I'm from the Bay Area, and we have, like, if you look outside, it's a beautiful sunny day, and that doesn't hurt. But I have to, as maybe as like disappointing as it might sound, if you want to really go, I would say at least the venture route, which is the route that you and I have both taken. These locations and the network effect in these locations and the culture of these places is really, really important for your business. I think, my perspective on, should we make Ithaca a hub for fundraising and like be able to raise, $10, $20 million rounds in Ithaca? I'm not sure that's the best approach. I think maybe we specialize, right? Like Ithaca and Cornell, you are awesome at creating the technologies and doing that early stage of like proof of concept, product market fit. And that's where you should shine. And then there are already these other places where like that's where the capital is, and that's where the culture and the community of people who are interested in taking high risk professions, for example, are. And so I almost think a specialization approach makes sense. And I see value across like, that entire chain.
Yeah, it's extremely interesting topic, certainly not an easy one. Everyone here in Ithaca Upstate is certainly trying to help improve the ecosystem. But just as you said, Rachel, I think the ecosystem has improved, but maybe particularly on the early stage, right? So these company, Lionano, they were in this Cornell incubator, right, in early days, and you were in Rochester, upstate New York. I think that the ecosystem we build that, trying to help these at least early stage companies much more than, let's say, 15 years ago, that they and much more resources to at least get the company started with some seed funding. In later stage, it's probably harder to compete in some other areas, but I was just as happy if you grow and move away. But I think then you're contributing back to this ecosystem to help more companies started and have a better ecosystem. Maybe in the future, this can be increased even better. Then some companies can more effectively stay. But I think at least for very early stage right now, we have much better and richer ecosystem already with that. Yeah, but I think whatever you have said, it makes sense, and for the growth of the company. So you talked about fundraising, and then both of you certainly went through from early stage seed funding, raised some seed funding and grants, but then to later stage, later series. And maybe you can share some of the experience or lesson learned that in the fundraising process. Rachel, can you start first this one?
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned I did a lot of kind of like pitching and trying to fundraise in upstate New York. I was intimidated by fundraising when I first started doing it. I kept being like, yeah, I'm going to go fundraise for the company. We had, maybe a couple million in grants like that, and we needed to go get, private capital to take the company to the next stage. I was like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll go on like this trip. I want to come back. I'll do it. And I remember my advisor was like, so, have you lined up, meetings and stuff like that. And it was scary. Like I was kind of intimidated to start this process. And it's actually my first kind of real pitch to an investor came from a contact through Cornell. And it was like my buddy at Cornell who did his Ph.D. with my husband introduced me to a guy who was kind of a mentor, who then said, oh, I have like a group that's getting a fund together that's interested in companies like yours. And so I pitched them. And that went very well. I had a term sheet, you know, a couple days later, and then I was like, oh, that went fast. And now I need to, like, you know, get my syndicate together. You know, my advice about fundraising in the venture route is, like, there's an ecosystem of venture. It's actually a model. You can, like, model it. It's a system. You can run through this process. There's so much focus on the pitch and getting the perfect pitch. I spent months making a pitch, and the pitch is important from the fundraising perspective only to get you in the door and get another conversation, where then everything behind that pitch is really talked about. So you have to be compelling enough for like 15 minutes that you get the next conversation. I think one reason there's so much focus on the pitch is because a concise story, a concise, compelling story requires you to work through some of the hard questions about the business model overall. So you know, just getting the pitch, it's actually pretty fun if you like presenting, but it's not really about that pitch. It's all the stuff that goes into it. And the goal of the pitch, it just like gets your foot in the door, and it's to get the next conversation to really dig into the business. Do your homework on your investors. So, like, every investment firm has a investment thesis, and they might like to invest in clean tech in companies that have valuations between 30 and 50 million, and you can look at their portfolio and does it match kind of what you're doing, and or not, because if not, they're not going to be a good fit for you, and you're wasting your time and their time. So make sure that your investors are, you know, the right fit for you from a logistical investment perspective, and then make sure that they're a really good fit for you from a personal perspective and a professional perspective, because you're going to be working really closely with these people. I view our investors as our financial partners. They are on my team all the time. They sit on our board. I rely on them just as they rely on me. So you're going to develop like a very important relationship with your investors. So it's not just like they're doing you a favor, giving you money. They're investing in your company. They're getting a piece of something that could be really, really valuable. So view yourself and your business as valuable, and vice versa. So it's an important relationship.
Very good advice. Siyu?
Yep. So for the fundraising, I think my first memory come to fundraising was one of this Cornell trustee meeting. I think we were in one of this commercialization class at Johnson School, and one of the professors recommended to join a class, the Cornell trust meeting, like in Q4 2013. And that's the first time that we really faced investors, like with a lot of people with deep pockets there. And I remember the first meeting we had, and there was a guy, which later on became really close friend and advisor for us. He stood up and told us, hey, nobody's investing in battery space right now. You guys know A123 just went bankrupt, and nobody's going to invest in the next 10 years either. I still remember that first reaction to me. It's like really cold and really, like, it's a brutal reality to all of us. And we know it was not the best timing to raise funding, and it has been difficult, honestly speaking, for the first few years. Mm-hmm. And especially when I was not full-time, and when our co-founder and my husband, he's working on his own as a technology leader, it was difficult. But I think the two important things I wanted to share with everybody is the resilience and the dedication, never to give up. That's really important. And about, I would say the second one is the commercial driven approach is really important. So when you're at early stage, you want to be really focused on customers instead of just focus on technology, because we don't want to create a technology that doesn't even have application. So that's the approach that I think we took in a very early stage. We make pivots. It's fine. It's fine to be fail, but you want it to fail well, that you can still stay in the game. And what we have learned is that if you have a early stage company, even you don't have revenues, but you have really strong customers backing you up, either with purchase orders or with investor or investment to the company, that's huge to bring in like quality investors, especially financial investors, as a tag-along approach. So like fast forward in a few years, right now we have obviously the major OEMs working with us. And also we're building a team that is strong with a lot of formal CEOs of the OEMs. And we're able to bring a much compelling story to the market with much stronger validation from the testing results. And I think that is extremely important to help you anchor a good valuation and to grow the team, and also to make the company more real. And I would say, but nowadays it's more like investor knocking on the door and say we wanted to invest, but we told them, I'm sorry, we closed 2 weeks ago. We cannot have any funding to the company.
That's a very good place to be in.
Yeah, but also at the same time, you wanted to build a relationship. And this is the best time for you to reach out to your contacts when you close the round and tell them, hey, we just closed the round and we're happy to catch up and share with you more exciting update for the company. I think that's the best timing for reaching out. And definitely Cornell network is huge. And I was sharing with Rachel and Alex before the meeting too, is we always see that, like, I have my diploma in the bag, but we often come across another diploma on the other side of the camera. And that's always a great advantage you can leverage, not only in raising funding, but even building the team. Like I would say 2 most important additions for the past year in our board and on our executive team are all from Cornell relationships. And those are relationships that you need to maintain in a long term, and building the trust and building the connection and building the appreciation over time.
Yeah, this is extremely important. And so as a starting company, I think regardless you're male, female, young or old, it's a difficult thing for everybody, right? Starting a company, certainly. But as a young woman entrepreneur in this process, and do you think there's additional challenges you face in this process, and how did you overcome this in the time of difficulty, particularly facing young women entrepreneurs? And Siyu, you want to start with that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I have a lot of story to tell, but it's definitely not easy. I would say the 2 biggest challenge. One is about family. The family and work-life balance is really important. I still remember when we had our first pitch, one of the first pitches in Shark Tank at Cornell, I was 4 months pregnant with Olivia, my first one, and then we took the company to the A round, and I was pregnant with my second son, and there was 7 days to the due date for the final pitch before we closed. And it was literally 2 days before I delivered the baby, because the baby coming 5 days earlier. And it was really just at a boundary there, but it's a lot of commitment that you have to manage the daytime work, you have to manage the investor pitch, and you have to manage the big valley in front of you, and to make sure they're healthy and happy. And when even nowadays, you have to manage all the shuffling between schools and home and pick up and the summer camp and all this stuff. That's definitely not an easy thing. But I think like for everybody, obviously there's a meaning of your life, and you wanted to make the best balance you like, because everybody's balance is different. You need to find your pivot point. And I think for me, I think it's not the success or the meaning of your life is not defined by just the work, but you also need to have the balance in family and your entire balance as a life. So yeah, we may take some sacrifices that you may not become a 10 billion company in 6 months, but if you have a healthy family, that's something we're able to sacrifice. And I would say the second biggest challenge I've seen is, I know it's a lot of women audience here probably, and I wanted to be very frankly speaking here, is is all this unconscious or conscious prejudice that we have seen in the startup world, in the venture world. And I think I've been walking to the office and I've seen investors come in and told me like, hey, I was able to find my company by with only 3 people without a product, with just idea in mind, and I was able to raise hundreds of millions of dollars because I'm Caucasian. I'm a man, Caucasian. And how do you believe you can do it? I've seen that before. And it's not easy for you to swallow. And sometimes you just have to face it and realize the difference. But believe in yourself and be really confident that you can do very well. And also sometimes you need to be able to confront that with your feedback to them and tell them, yes, you have your way of doing things, and you may think that's right to sell a company without a product. You'll be able to sell something that's not even real, right? But I have my way of doing things, and I like to sell a company with a real product, with a real commercial value out of it. But it doesn't mean that if you're Caucasian or I'm an Asian woman that I cannot do it. I don't think that makes a difference. And when you push back to them, I think they are sometimes really appreciated, and they may not even realize that they had that prejudice. But when you tell them, that actually make you more respected in front of them too. Yeah, so that's just a little experience as a woman entrepreneur, and I'm sure this is not uncommon in the industry.
Before I ask Rachel to answer that, and I want to again encourage the audience to pose their own questions. So, because the time is running there. Rachel, I will please address that from your point of view. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess the question, like, what challenges you have as a woman entrepreneur, and how did you handle them? And there's clear, like, the numbers can show you that, like, there's not that many women in venture. There's fewer, female entrepreneurs. My strategy for, about 10 years since I graduated from Cornell was I never felt different than anybody at Cornell. My strategy has been to try to make it a non-issue, try to make the fact that I'm a female irrelevant, to focus as much as possible as I can on content. So for example, my appearance, I try to make, whenever I'm going to a pitch or a meeting or, meeting with other CEOs or whatever, like, make it as unremarkable as possible. Like, I don't want to dress like a slob, and I don't want to look too showy, because I just want it to be about the content, and try to make it as much of a non-issue as I possibly can. And I have to say, I feel like that's worked well for me in these first 10 years. My perspective on this issue, though, I think is changing. And maybe part of it is early on, I felt less confident, or I had less power, or there was, few people willing to talk about this. My perspective changed, I think, when I became a mom in late 2018 and, experiencing, okay, what does it mean to be a mom CEO? How do I manage, a startup company, and how do I figure this out? And how are people going to view this? And I have, like, many stories, like I'm sure other entrepreneurs have. One of my favorite stories is we raised our A. I was like, okay, then I'll try to get pregnant, have my baby in December so that I can go out and raise my B in, like, Q1 of the next year. That was literally my plan, which is a little crazy, but it was what I planned to do. In November, I was 7 months pregnant. I was definitely showing. I got an unsolicited introduction to a very high profile investor here in the Valley. And, like, somebody where people would die to get this meeting. I might be raising in 6 months or something. And I was like, what do I do? Like, I can't turn down this meeting, but I'm, like, totally, showing. And my concern was somebody would see me as a pregnant woman and say, you're not committed to your business and I can't invest in you. You're uninvestable. And so my plan was literally to call, she was a female, very, very high profile female investor. I was going to call her and say, hey, I'd love to meet. Let's meet in January, like, to try to push this meeting back. And it was my husband who said, if you see an investor and they don't want to invest in you because you're pregnant, do you want that investor in your business? And I was like, oh my, you are so right. I don't want that person in my business. And so I had the meeting, and it was awesome. And we actually spent 2 hours together, and the first hour was mommying out. We talked for an hour about what it's like to be a professional woman, and the the gory details of, you know, new babies and parenthood. And then we spent an hour talking in depth about my business and how they might be able to help. And, you know, there was they like Siyu really wanted to invest in me. We didn't have space in that round. But there is also this mommy club. And there is a lot of support out there. And so I like to focus on the positive. You know, I was kind of neutral before. Now I like to focus on the positive of what can come out of this. There's a lot of allies out there. I found allies on my team. My colleague here, when we went out to investors, I would have to say, you know, we're meeting back to back. I need to take 20 minutes in this restaurant bathroom to pump. And she was like, yeah, cool. Like, I'll be on the computer. And she just really understood that and helped me feel comfortable with that. So my perspective has been to own it, to realize that there's a lot of allies, to not be shy about talking about it. And the best advice that I got when I was pregnant with my first was like, you're going to have this new power as a mom, and you'll kind of realize it. Harness that power, that you can do all of this stuff. You have this strength, and use it to make you a better CEO. And actually, you're going to have an edge. And I think it's really true. And I think that was the best advice that I got in terms of, you know, you know, creating a life, designing my life in the way that I want to, and you being authentically myself. And I'm a woman, so that's kind of my perspective on like women in entrepreneurship right now. And I guess, like I said, it's evolving based on my experience.
Right. It's a fascinating story to what you just shared, you know, how you view. I think in many aspects, it's not only how the society is behaving, it's how we are changing ourselves, and also, you know, be more expressive and supportive and to do that. And for this is what it should be, right? Rather than we're hiding things ourselves for that. But fortunately, I think that overall, this community is realizing that. I see many efforts, you know, supporting women entrepreneurs, researchers, innovators, but also in the venture community, how to have women investors, women board members. So there's a big push for all these things, and I think it's changing, evolving, and I expect to see more of these changes in the future to help this more healthier and also a more promotive environment for women to shine in this space, right? So I think that, you know, time flies. we already got to the last couple of minutes of our webinar, and I first want to thank you both and to share your experience, and also very fresh experience in very recent years to bring success into technologies, to startups, and also to your life. I felt like that's a celebration and of this entrepreneurship and, you know, woman, you know, womanship. Let's just say this in that. And thank you so much for sharing your experience and advice with us today. I also want to encourage today's audience, and then if you have questions, I want to be paired with women mentors, do let us know. And this is a program we certainly want to grow from a CTL point of view. And in the end, I also want to thank our CTL own staff member, like particularly Linda Insik, and she is a manager for our initial technology initiatives and outreach, and she's one, you know, making this happen today, and particularly thanking her to help organize all this today's events. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, and thank for our speakers, and thank for the audience, and we will be more to follow up on these topics in the future in our series. Okay.